nothing to return to but the demons in their caves. Oh, to be Prince Caspian, afloat upon the waves. Oh, to be Prince Caspian, afloat upon the waves. Caspian, afloat upon the waves. Oh, to be Prince Caspian, and the children in the fields all sowing seed and chaffing wheat. Oh, to be Prince Caspian, with stumps instead of feet.
that. Thank you, Yola Tango. I think we're going to skip the religious opening, the Slavic Orthodox opener I like to use because I've already played a bunch of music. And, I don't deserve it. I'm not, not religious enough to play religious music. It all smacks of satire and sarcasm, and that's not how I intended. It's supposed to be respectful and to recognize the, religious nature of the day. And we're going to go back to reading. We're going to read. And somebody leaves the moment I start talking. Well, good riddance to you, sir. Go with God. Let Him have you. Let Him endure you. We're going to go back to reading. But I'm not going to. What I want to do typically is go to. There we go. Go and read the Torah reading, and then go see what the Catholics are doing. Because frankly, nobody else matters. Yeah, and Protestants. Come on, Protestants. You know you don't count. Really? I mean, culturally, sociologically, you count very much. But I mean, when you're talking about actual religion, the faith, you know, be living or dead, if it's all just an artifactual remnant or a living thing, either way, you Protestants, you just don't count. You just don't rate. You're just, you are downstream of secular culture. And that's okay. I mean, somewhere out there is a hip hop church. Yeah, I guess that guy was here for the Yola. It is a good song. It's a great old tune. All right, but the Torah reading today is Leviticus 9 through 11:47 or something, and it's Moses and Aaron and the burnt offerings. Yeah, and here's the background. I have no idea. I just went looking briefly for some sort of background to this because I think that anytime we read from the Bible, the background you see should be just very biblical, very Ten Commandments cinematic biblical. Yeah, but this is the best I could find. It's kind of grotesque, but animal sacrifice is grotesque. And the visuals you'll see are mass animal beheadings at Nepal's Gadamai festival. So it's Hindus, I guess, or whoever is still practicing these. Obviously something I'm completely against. My religion would include kindness towards animal as one of its foundations. All right, so that's the background. And we're going to read Leviticus 9 through 11. All right. Should I take my face off of here? No, we're going to go ahead. Yeah, I just hate to see animal sacrifice. That's the worst. But yeah, anyway. Leviticus 9. And there are, of course, we'll talk about that later. It begins. I always read from the King James Version, which is not what, your Jews reading their Torahs are. Obviously, they're reading the Torahs. But the Torah, language in the Torah, it's contemporary. At least the one I had. I had a copy of a Torah, actually. And I actually had it before we started doing the Torah talks with Luke Ford. I found it in a thrift store. I used to go thrift store diving all the time. For two things, clothes and books. You find cool old clothes and you find cool old books. Used to. It seems like they suck now. If I drop into one now, it just seems like it's awful. clothes you wouldn't wear, and books you wouldn't read. But I found some Jewish girl in Portland somewhere had donated her Torah. Good for you, sweetheart. I approve of that. You dump your Torahs, all of you. Get rid of that crap. She had dumped her Torah off in the Goodwill or whatever. It was her bat mitzvah Torah. I know that because it was, inscribed in the book and everything. There's her name, Ashley Levin or whatever. And so I don't know. There's a popular version of the Torah. Maybe there's another version of the Torah which has more traditional, better language. But the popular version of the Torah, something with an M, right? You guys may know this. Um, oh, something coming through the headphones. Hang on. Okay, sorry. Anyway, the language is very contemporary, and it just reads horribly to me. Uh, it reads like, one of these new American Bibles, right? The totally updated language Bibles that you see out there. I just refuse to even go there. And it's funny, I used to read the King James Bible. It was like Shakespeare, right? I mean, the language was difficult. I still have a problem reading Shakespeare. I recently finished King Lear. And that one is so difficult because the language, because you're stopping every few lines to say, okay, what's that word? What's he mean? Aside from the phraseology and the pentameter and all of that, that makes it kind of difficult to follow. It's not contemporary at all. Um, it's almost angering. I used to feel that way about the King James Bible, but now when I read it, um, it's just way better. It's just way better than, like I said, reading a modern Torah or American, new American Bible. Anyway, let's get on with it, shall we? Are they sacrificing those goats yet? Let's go. That's already over? Okay, let's just. Those poor goats. All right. Leviticus 9. And it came to pass on the 8th day that Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel. And he said unto Aaron, Take thee a young calf for a sin offering, and a ram for a burnt offering, without blemish, and offer them before the Lord. And unto the children of Israel thou shalt speak, saying, Take ye a kid of the goats for a sin offering, and a calf and a lamb, both of the first year, without blemish, for a burnt offering. Also a bullock and a ram for peace offerings, to sacrifice before the Lord, and a meat offering mingled with oil, for today the Lord will appear unto you. And they brought that which Moses commanded before the tabernacle of the congregation, and all the congregation drew near and stood before the Lord. And Moses said, This is the thing which the Lord commanded that ye should do, and the glory of the Lord shall appear unto you. And Moses said unto Aaron, Go unto the altar, and offer thy sin offering, and thy burnt offering, and make an atonement for thyself, and for the people, and offer the offering of the people, and make an atonement for them, as the Lord commanded. Aaron therefore went unto the altar, and slew the calf of the sin offering, which was for himself. And the sons of Aaron brought the blood unto him, and he dipped his finger in the blood, and put it upon the horns of the altar, and poured out the blood at the bottom of the altar. But the fat and the kidneys and the caul, that's the membrane, above the liver of the sin offering, he burnt upon the altar, as the Lord commanded Moses. And the flesh and the hide he burnt with fire without the camp. And he slew the burnt offering, and Aaron's sons presented him unto the blood, which he sprinkled round upon the altar. And they presented the burnt offering unto him, with the pieces thereof, and the head, and he burnt them upon the altar. And he did wash the inwards and the legs, and burnt them upon the burnt offering on the altar. And he brought the people's offering, and took the goat, which was the sin offering for the people, and slew it, and offered it for sin, as the first. And he brought the burnt offering, and offered it according to the manner. And he brought the meat offering, and took a handful thereof, and burnt it upon the altar, beside the burnt sacrifice of the morning. He slew also the bullock and the ram for a sacrifice of peace offerings, which was for the people. And Aaron's sons presented unto him the blood, which he sprinkled upon the altar round about. And the fat of the bullock and of the ram, the rump, and that which covereth the inwards, and the kidneys, and the caul above the liver. And they put the fat upon the breasts, and he burnt the fat upon the altar. And the breasts and the right shoulder Aaron waved for a wave offering before the Lord, as Moses commanded. Just picture this scene, right? The blood, and they're waving around pieces of the animal, and the stink in there. This is just. And Aaron lifted up his hand toward the people, and blessed them, and came down from offering of the sin offering, and the burnt offering, and peace offerings. And Moses and Aaron went into the tabernacle of the congregation, and came out, and blessed the people. And the glory of the Lord appeared unto all the people. And there came a fire out from before the Lord. So the fire expands, supposedly. This fire that's not explained by the burning animal. And consumed upon the altar the burnt offering and the fat, which all the people saw. They shouted and fell on their faces. Rather, the animal's already burnt, right? And all of a sudden it lights up. And Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took either of them his censer, and put fire therein, and put incense thereon, and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he commanded them not. And there went out fire from the Lord, and devoured them, and they died before the Lord. So the fire's there, right? And it kind of blows up, and it burns these two Yehudis, sons of Aaron. Then Moses said unto Aaron, This is it that the Lord spake, saying, I will be sanctified in them that come nigh me, and before all the people I will be glorified. And Aaron held his peace. So Moses said, yeah, your sons just got burnt alive, but it's cool. This is what the Lord wants. And Aaron bit his tongue. Love it. Love the Old Testament, don't you? And Moses called Mishael and Elzaphan, the sons of Uzziel, the uncle of Aaron, and said unto them, Come near, carry your brethren from before the sanctuary out of the camp. So they went near and carried them in their coats out of the camp. I guess the burnt up bodies, as Moses had said. And Moses said unto Aaron and unto Eleazar and unto Ithamar his sons, Uncover not your heads, neither rend your clothes, lest ye die, and lest wrath come upon all the people. But let your brethren, the whole house of Israel, bewail the burning which the Lord hath kindled. And ye shall not go out from the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, lest ye die, for the anointing oil of the Lord is upon you. And they did according to the word of Moses. And the Lord spake unto Aaron, saying, Do not drink wine, nor strong drink, thou, nor thy sons with thee, when ye go into the tabernacle of the congregation, lest ye die. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations. And that ye may put difference between holy and unholy, and between unclean and clean, and that ye may teach the children of Israel all the statutes which the Lord hath spoken unto them by the hands of Moses. And Moses spake unto Aaron and unto Eleazar and unto Ithamar his sons that were left, Take the meat offering that remaineth of the offerings of the Lord made by the fire, and eat it without leaven beside the altar, for it is most holy. And ye shall eat it in the holy place, because it is thy due, and thy sons' due, of the sacrifices of the Lord made by fire. For so I am commanded. So basically the two sons of Aaron become human sacrifices. And it's almost a sneaky way that Leviticus, the book of Leviticus, offers that. Like, we did not intend to offer the sons as sacrifices. They were the Lord just collected them. But we nonetheless will accept the fait accompli that they are human sacrifices. And of course, the obvious thing you're going to think, I'm sure, is that the host of our church, the Catholic Church, communion, and the host eating the bread is eating the flesh of Jesus. One realizes that Jesus becomes a sort of human sacrifice. There is at least some relationship to the old, superstitious, ancient practice of human sacrifice. There's something of it in the story of the Passion and the Resurrection. I guess the resurrection probably it can be considered, to supersede sacrifice, to have sort of reconciled this ancient practice. I think if I was an apologist for Christianity, that's how I would offer it. That that it's not related. I mean, that's a crude way to look at it, Dennis. It's not human sacrifice. It's not sort of symbolic human sacrifice. No, it is in fact closing that finally, recognizing that our forefathers of prehistory offered human sacrifices, and we close that out. It's another sacrifice that Jesus made for us, really. Okay. I don't remember where I was. And the wave breast and the heave shoulder shall ye eat in a clean place, thou and thy sons and thy daughters with thee, for they be thy due, and thy sons' due, which are given out of the sacrifices of peace offerings of the children of Israel. This was one thing with burnt offerings too, was that choice pieces they would eat of this, and they're burnt, they're cooked. And I'm not sure, right? Did they just burn the animals up randomly, or they were actually kind of cooking them? Because they would take and eat of it, eat the meat. And choice pieces were for select people. The heave shoulder and the wave breast shall they bring with the offerings made by the fire of the fat, to wave it for a wave offering before the Lord. And it shall be thine and thy sons with thee by statute forever, as the Lord hath commanded. And Moses diligently sought the goat of the sin offering, and behold, it was burnt. And he was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, the sons of Aaron, which were left alive, saying, Wherefore have ye not eaten the sin offering in the holy place, seeing it is most holy? And God hath given it to you, to bear the iniquity of the congregation, to make atonement for them before the Lord. To bear the iniquity of the congregation, right? To take on your sins, right? Where do we hear this in Christianity? To die or otherwise perform something for your sins. Behold, the blood of it was not brought in within the holy place. Ye should indeed have eaten it in the holy place, as I commanded. And Aaron said unto Moses, Behold, this day have they offered their sin offering and their burnt offering before the Lord, and such things have befallen me. And if I had eaten the sin offering today, should it have been accepted in the sight of the Lord? And when Moses heard that, he was content. Oh, so we got some Jews arguing, right? And this is what we see over and over again in Judaism. The rules are all important. But what happens when rules, and many can seem quite arbitrary, coming as they do out of this brutal, crude, ancient past? Yet, the rules are important. The rules are everything. They're more important than the God who makes them, it seems. But what happens? Well, people start, society begins to develop around defining the rules. And if the rules are sacrosanct, if the rules are inviolable, then the only thing you can do, if you not can't break the rules, well, you can redefine them. And that's what we see happening in Judaism, in Judaism and in the Jewish community broadly. This endless, uh, this endless maelstrom of everything from sophistry to genuine legal argument to just, all manner, and to all the ridiculous sort of tricks people do to be nominally in agreement with the rules, like putting a little wire around Manhattan so you can do things on Sunday, just stupid, crazy stuff. All right, Leviticus 11. This is almost over. And the Lord spake unto Moses and to Aaron, saying unto them, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, These are the beasts which ye shall eat among all the beasts that are on the earth. Now it's amazing how we're still doing this, right? And you got to remember that these rules around what animals you will eat probably predate even this old Hebrew text. Like my, wholly unoriginal interpretation of the Bible and these old beliefs is that most of them, in fact, arise as explanatory adaptations to reality, like something like the book of Genesis. You can't, it's not enough for people to say, okay, we have no idea the nature of the universe, the nature of the earth. We have no idea how it began. So you have to craft a story. You have to. And even practices like, for whatever reason, people decided, people in this part of the world, for good reasons, we're not going to eat pigs because they eat anything and they're horribly dirty. So we just won't eat them. And then later it becomes a biblical rule. Anyway, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, These are the beasts which ye shall eat among all the beasts that are on the earth. Whatsoever parteth the hoof, and is cloven-footed, and cheweth the cud among the beasts, that shall ye eat. So that includes cows and stuff, cattle. Nevertheless, these shall ye not eat of them that chew the cud, or of them that divide the hoof, as the camel, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean to you. And the coney, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean to you. And the hare, because he cheweth the cud, does he? That's a rabbit. Do rabbits chew their cud? I don't think so. But divideth not the hoof, he is unclean to you. Yeah, well, that's just silly. I like rabbit. And the swine, though he divideth the hoof, and he be cloven-footed, yet he cheweth not the cud, he is unclean to you. Of their flesh shall ye not eat, and their carcass shall ye not touch. They are unclean to you. These shall ye eat of all that are in the waters, whatsoever hath fins and scales in the waters, in the seas and in the rivers, them shall ye eat. And all that have not fins and scales in the seas and the rivers, and all that move in the waters, and of any living thing which is in the waters, they shall be an abomination unto you. Yeah, you don't get shellfish, screw that. They shall be even an abomination unto you. Ye shall not eat of their flesh, but ye shall have their carcasses in abomination. Whatsoever hath no fins nor scales in the waters, that shall be an abomination unto you. And these are they which ye shall have in abomination among the fowls. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination. The eagle, and the ossifrage, and the osprey, and the vulture, and the kite after its kind, every raven after its kind, and the owl, and the nighthawk, and the cuckoo, and the hawk after its kind. and the little owl, and the cormorant, and the great owl, and the swan, and the pelican, and the gier eagle, and the stork, and the heron after her kind, and the lapwing, and the bat. All no bat soup for you, Yehoods. All fowls that creep, going upon all four, shall be an abomination to you. I don't know what foul bird goes on all four, but okay, maybe there are weird birds around that we don't know about. Maybe they went extinct. Yet these may, excuse me, excuse me. Oh, I'm looking over. Hey, Judas, gotta do more. Phil, Rustin, thank you for the comments. We'll go through those momentarily. Okay. Yet these may ye eat of every flying, creeping thing that goeth upon all four, which have legs above their feet. Where else do you have legs? To leap withal upon the earth. Even these of them ye may eat, the locust after his kind, and the bald locust after his kind, and the beetle after his kind, and the grasshopper after his kind. Thanks, but no thanks. But all other flying, creeping things, which have 4 feet, shall be an abomination unto you. And for these ye shall be unclean. Whosoever toucheth the carcass of them shall be unclean until the even. And whatsoever beareth aught of the carcass of them shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. The carcasses of every beast, which divideth the hoof, and is not cloven-footed, nor cheweth the cud, are unclean to you. Every one that toucheth them shall be unclean. And whatsoever goeth upon his paws, among all manner of beasts that go on all four, those are unclean unto you. Whoso toucheth their carcass shall be unclean until even. This is a good one, right? So it's dogs and cats you can't eat. And he that beareth the carcass of them shall wash his clothes and be unclean until even. They are unclean to you. These also shall be unclean unto you among the creeping things that creep upon the earth, the weasel, and the mouse, and the tortoise after his kind, and the ferret, and the chameleon, and the lizard, and the snail, and the mole. These are unclean to you among all that creep. Whosoever doth touch them, even when they be dead, shall be unclean until the even. And upon whatsoever any of them, when they are dead, doth fall, it shall be unclean, whether it be any vessel of wood, or raiment, or skin, or sack, whatsoever vessel it be, wherein any work is done, it must be put into the water, and it shall be unclean until the evening, so it shall be cleansed. And every earthen vessel, whereinto any of them falleth, whatsoever is in it shall be unclean, and ye shall break it. Of all meat which may be eaten, that on which such water cometh shall be unclean, and all drink that may be drunk in every such vessel shall be unclean, and everything whereupon any part of their carcass falleth shall be unclean. Whether it be oven, or ranges, or pots, they shall be broken down, for they are unclean, and shall be unclean unto you. Nevertheless, a fountain or pit, wherein there is plenty of water, shall be clean. But that which toucheth their carcass shall be unclean. And if any part of their carcass fall upon any sowing seed which is to be sown, it shall be clean. But if any water be put upon the seed, and any part of their carcass fall thereon, it shall be unclean unto you. And if any beast of which ye may eat die, he that toucheth the carcass thereof shall be unclean until the even. And he that eateth of the carcass of it shall wash his clothes, and be unclean until the even. He also that beareth the carcass of it shall wash his clothes, and be unclean until the even. And every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth shall be an abomination. It shall not be eaten. Whatsoever goeth upon the belly, and whatsoever goeth upon all four, or whatsoever hath more feet among all creeping things that creep upon the earth, them ye shall not eat, for they are an abomination. Ye shall not make yourselves abominable with any creeping thing that creepeth, neither shall ye make yourselves unclean with them, that ye should be defiled thereby. For I am the Lord your God. Ye shall therefore sanctify yourselves, and ye shall be holy, for I am holy. Neither shall ye defile yourselves with any manner of creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. For I am the Lord that bringeth you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. Ye shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. This is the law of the beasts, and of the fowl, and of every living creature that moveth in the waters, and of every creature that creepeth upon the earth, to make a difference between the unclean and the clean, and between the beast that may be eaten and the beast that may not be eaten. All right, thank God that's over. Phil the Kill says, they think they outsmarted God himself with the Eruv. What is the Eruv? Oh, yeah. An eruv is a symbolic boundary, often a wire or the designated line that allows observant Jews to carry items and push strollers in public areas on the Sabbath. Yeah, it's funny. What is their conception of God if they think he's going to be fooled? I mean, do they ever talk about this grand contradiction, right? Oh, God, their God is not all-seeing. He's not omnipotent. So their God naturally gave birth to Jesus. I always say, I would be an Arian. If I was a Christian, I would be an Arian. That is, the Arians held that Jesus was not God walking among us. He was not divine. He was a man. I would absolutely hold that because obviously they're right. I mean, you can't be, God can't take human form, and I'm sure that, the great controversy. Excuse me. The great controversies were all about that, of course. But, I don't know. I'm sure somebody has said this. I'm sure I'm not thinking it for the first time. But the whole idea of a God dying for your sins is absolutely ridiculous. God can't die. To me, it's a paradox. I call it the Dale paradox because I've never seen anybody say. I might be the first person to say this. But the paradox of the dying God, of God's death. I mean, God, omnipotent, all-powerful, eternal being cannot die. But not being able to die means he's not truly omnipotent. He can't do everything. Can you die? So, that also tells me something. 3 people watching. All right, fuck off. Just fuck off. I'll talk to you 3 people who are here. All right. Just fuck off, all you went away. Go on. Go. God will smite you for that. Oh, Rustin Roar says, I am still on my Welbeck binge. I am Bruno in his Elementary Particles. Yeah, that's maybe the best one, Elementary Particles. And it's an older book now. It was very much the book for the time. And I don't know if anybody else was writing about it, atomization. Yeah, that's, and I read the most recent one, which is, it's a good book. He's softened up. It is sentimental in parts. This book, as harsh as he is in books like Platform and the Elementary Particles. This last one, I think, is the most recent, Annihilation. Yeah, that's it. Finally got around to reading it. It's probably 3 or 4 years old. It seems to be him just making his peace with it all. It's like Welbeck saying, you know, it's over, but I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to complain. I'm going to honor what's left, what we had. You know, it's incomplete because there are things that happen early in the book. I get the feeling that he started out with certain storylines. If you read the book, you'll see what I mean. And they just sort of abandoned them. Um, but it really becomes about death and about a guy who's still kind of young, uh, dying. And this is the protagonist and, you know, somewhat autobiographical character. You know, it's him exploring the idea of his own death. And it is absolutely beautiful passages towards the end of the book. But yeah, Phil the Kill says, yes, Shakespeare is tough reading. You know, some are different than others. You know, I read Macbeth and I was surprised at how little goes on in Macbeth. The, diff- the difference between King Lear and Macbeth. And Macbeth seems like it's easier to read through. But the difference is great. Macbeth is probably like less than half as long. And, you know, not a lot happens in Macbeth. Whereas in King Lear, it's very, you know, very involved. I can't say I enjoyed it. I just do it. I mean, it's really a sense of duty, you know, to do it, to read Shakespeare. And they're it, but there are jewels there. Even if you're a dummy like me, there's so many quotable jewels in there, bits of wisdom. You know, it's like reading the King James Bible. But like I said, reading the King James Bible is actually easier. Rustin says, I think King Lear probably is the most difficult play. It is. I mean, I was losing track of what exactly was happening in parts because the language is tough. There's a lot of players, and there's a lot going on. Not just King Lear losing his shit. Excuse me. Rustin says, I have most of the plays downloaded on Audible. Anton Lester's a great voice actor. That sounds good. I used to do a lot. I used to be in the car a lot for work, and I used to do a lot of loading up of, you know, whatever. It was before YouTube had so much stuff. So I'd do a lot of LibriVox, right? You could LibriVox recordings. And some are better than others, and they're very dependent, on, of course, on who's reading them. But there was, you know, there's the great histories by this guy, Bury. You probably know something Bagnall Bury, I think is the Irish guy's name. He has these great histories of the Greeks and other the medieval period and other things. But there's one LibriVox. It's just so great because the guy reading it has this classic old Irish accent somehow. I don't know if he's putting it on or what, but it's like you feel like you're listening to John Bagnall Bury read. Rabbi Judas Chai, black-pilled Hebrew guy, says, I am going to do a superior stream on Judaica and the BP and Inkwell issues on Claire Kaw's Office of Secular Coronism. All right, we'll look for that. Okay. Judas says, no one cares about the weekly Torah portion. You don't have Ford and Casey, Melchizedek, Manic, Bibler, Content Watch, Christian Coper, racist professor, man. Yeah, well, we used to do Torah talks at Ford's, and I think eventually we just stopped even dipping into the Torah reading. Yeah, it started out, we'd read it, then we'd talk about it. I was utterly ignorant, not even aware enough to be anti Semitic just yet. And we'd have, these kind of amateur analyses of what we just read. Two watching. Go to fucking hell. I don't care if it's Sunday. You should get cancer. Judas says, why read Bible copy pasta? It's not copy pasta. What are you fucking talking about? It's the fucking text. It's not copy paste if you're just going to find the fucking text, right? When you can talk about the PP, what's the PP? I don't even know what the BP is. British Petroleum? Is there is there something interesting happening with them? Is Hebrew too hard for Gentiles? Well, it's too hard for anyone who doesn't know how to speak it, Judas. Yeah, I mean, language with which I'm not conversant is generally hard. Yeah, yeah, because you don't know it. Like, yeah. And I guess, Finnish would be harder than Spanish because I can make out many of the cognates and other words in Spanish. They're similar, but the fuck are you talking about? I hope you're one of the people who left. Embrace the scene eatery. Gotta do more says, why do Don Jays worship a Jewish God, which is exactly what the chosen ones want? Yeah, it's the contradiction that they don't want to solve. They have to go with the EMG thing. They can't be anti-Semitic. They can't be opposed to Jews. They can't recognize that they oppose us, and so we should at least recognize that and recognize our adversarial relationship to them. No, they eventually have to go with, well, the Jews just need to recognize that Jesus is the Messiah, and then we'll all be Christians and we'll all be Jews essentially. Right? I mean, there'd be no difference. Christian, Jew, it doesn't make any difference if Jewish is the Messiah, and if he was in fact prophesied in the Old Torah, in the Old Testament, then the Jew-Christian distinction is meaningless. It evaporates. Uh, and I'm not, I'm just not, and it is a Middle Eastern faith. It's not of Europe. It has no real connection. It conquered Europe and we adopted it. We molded it to us, to our ways, and what we speak of as Christianity becomes difficult to separate what is actually Christian, what goes back to Paul and the apostles and the development of Christianity. I mean, and at what point is Christianity actually realized? That's a whole other question. But it becomes impossible to, well, not impossible. I mean, you could certainly do it. It's kind of pointless, but you can't separate out what is strictly Christian, what is strictly gospel, from what is Europeans interpreting this gospel and adapting it to European values, which are, yes, biological and are ultimately something that comes out of our evolutionary, our evolutionary reality. I mean, the people that were molded by the land of Europe, just as people molded by the desert regions, the Semites, and the people molded by the environment of Africa or Asia or wherever. That made you. I mean, and when you realize that, when you think of that, you realize that, hey, it's kind of like, all these old superstitious pagan religions that worshipped trees and land and the sun. They kind of have something on the later, so supposedly advanced religions, in that they recognized that we are in fact molded by our environment over ages, and the reality of weather and the reality of the land, its harshness, what it makes you do, you know, that made you all the way down to your bones. That's in your DNA, right? Anyway, yeah. Got to do more, says God will smite. Oh, yeah, I said that, sorry. Got to do more, says shocked. I say shocked. God chose the Jays to be the chosen ones. Phil the Kill says, I've debated doing the audiobook thing for a while. I feel like I will miss out on something or it won't stick as long if I don't actually sit down and read the words in the book. Yeah, well, the problem with audiobooks is you actually can't do fiction. There's no point. Because, I mean, if I'm listening, if I'm listening to fiction, I would have to sit there. I might as well read it because it's better. It's on the page. You can go back. You can go. So it's like being read to, in that that's all you do is sit there and listen to it, which is inferior to reading it on the page, and it has no advantage over reading it on the page at all. But frankly, what we do when we listen to audiobooks in whatever form, listen to podcasts, is we're usually doing something else. So nonfiction, I'm fine with it, though it's an inferior way to take that in too, obviously. But like he's talking about John Bagnall Bury, listening to that in the car, I mean, half of it I'm paying attention to other things. It's barely, but long stretches I'm hearing well enough to retain it. It works because I can miss parts. You know what I mean? It's not. I'm not an expert who's doing this for studying. I'm not going to write a thesis on this or anything. I'm just a guy who likes to take in this information, and so I retain part of it, and it's okay that I retain just part of it. But I can imagine doing it with a story. What are you going to do? Miss entire sections of a story, and then you don't actually have the story. I'm a little outraged. We were talking about, do I have it here? Oblomov. Somebody mentioned it here. You got to read this book. This book is for everybody. There's a little Oblomov in all of us. It's especially for us Gentiles to read, you know. Oblomov is a very Gentile guy. But so I went and I actually bought a paperback copy because I couldn't get. You have to read the right translation. I picked up the wrong translation once because it was available on Kindle. All right, I'll try this. Night and day. This translation was so awful you wouldn't even know this was a good book. It was just, what the hell is this guy doing? But there's a later translation by a guy named Stephen Pearl. That's just the only way to read it. And so I had to buy the paperback copy because it wasn't even on Kindle. So I went and got it, and this book is a paperback. I had read it in paperback form years ago. I don't know what I did with the book. I gave away like all my books once. I don't know why. So I get it, and it's about the same typeface and size type. It's not very big type, and the book is like this fat. It's just way fatter, and I'm thinking, and then, is there is there more in this book? What's going on? Uh, and then I realized, yeah, there were whole sections, important sections that were left out of that first copy, that first translation of Oblomov that I read. Uh, there's a section called Oblomov's Dream, uh, which explains the character and it sort of sets everything up. It's just key. And I think that was left out entirely. I don't remember anything about it in the first book that I read. I think they left it out entirely. And I'm like, who does that? That's like sacrilege. That's like leaving, leaving parts of the Bible out. But of course, that happened, That happened with your New Testament. It's happening, it happened with your Old Testament. That scribes sat down and they had fragmentary material, uh, and they did lots of filling in uh, what they thought was intended to be in there. And then probably some unscrupulous individuals who thought they were doing the right thing left out certain things that they thought, you know, were not going to be good for the cause. Phil the Kill says, "What's the name again, Dennis? I don't know. What name? John Bagnall Bury? I think that's the only person I've mentioned. Or Oblomov. Oblomov? Oh, Stephen Pearls. Yeah. Here we're going to write this out. Yeah, I guess he's a Yehudi, but yeah. Send me your address. I'll send you my copy. No, maybe I want to keep this one. The authors. Yeah. Yeah, Ivan Goncharov or Goncharov, however you say it. Uh, yeah, I mean the giants of Russian literature knew this guy and thought he was the best. Tolstoy, Chekhov said, "Oh, this guy's way better than me," but he only wrote like 3 books. I suspect Goncharov had a little Oblomov in him. Oblomov, the story of Oblomov is that he's a good soul. He's smart enough, capable enough. Uh, he's a good man, a decent man, but he's cursed with laziness. He's cursed with this inability to act. Um, and unless you're thoroughly dishonest, or just one of these like unusually focused people, like I said, you'll see that there's a little Oblomov in all of us. Maybe that's not so bad. Speaking of Russians, so Alexander Dugin is getting properly ratioed. He's a burnt offering on X Twitter right now. Phil says there's a film from 1980 based on this book. I'll have to check it out. So we haven't even talked about the dead Pope yet because, I don't have anything intelligent to say about it. That's one reason why I didn't include a clip. I want to include clips from Catholic services. If you can find a good one, you know what I mean? Like virtually none in America probably going to be interesting. Maybe you could find some interesting things happening in Catholicism on Sunday, which we'd like to include in Bubba's. But, so Alexander Dugin, is it after? Yeah, good old Dugin. Good old Dugin. He's talking about the dead pope, and there's a one of the debased black pope. So, in Catholicism, there's this really hyper version of, the based black guy worship. Call it the Thomas Sowell effect, right? That people who see a black guy who's based, who's anti-woke at all, there's a premium they apply to him for being black. And of course, this is a big thing in religion and Catholicism because all the bishops are from Africa. They, haven't been sullied by liberalism. Uh, they're all more based than Pope Francis ever was. Was that our last Pope Francis? I don't even know. What a bad Catholic I am. So there's this guy, Robert Sarah or Sarah. People are promoting him to be the next pope. He'll be a black pope. And you know what they're thinking, too, that Catholicism is probably growing in the third world and maybe in Africa. And it's, of course, dying off, sadly, in the West. So there's going to be a lot of people, perhaps, in the church who think, let's adapt to the new reality. And also, there, of course, are all these people who say this guy is based. He's not at all, he's not going to embarrass us like. It's funny. So the black pope from Africa is not going to do stupid, embarrassing, cringy things like kissing black immigrants' feet, right, to prove his holiness. Like, that's funny. That's kind of funny, right? So the South American pope, the white South American pope, is probably made himself sick. Somebody said this. Probably made himself sick kissing the feet of these Negroes. Because that's how you define Catholicism nowadays, I guess. But the black African pope is going to do it. I probably not. And of course, that's what people are thinking. We need this guy. So here's Alexander Dugin, who is the so-called philosopher from Russia, who's supposedly close to Putin, has never met him actually. I I think I've read that somewhere that they've never actually met, but supposedly, he's a neo-fascist close to Putin, and of course they assassinated his politically active daughter because we did it probably because we're evil fuckers. But Dugin is Andrew Torba retweeted this, I think, with the best response. Boomer, the tweet. So here's Boomer, the tweet. There are two excellent points in Robert Serra. He is traditional. He believes in God. He is black. His faith is authentic because blacks are less fraudulent than whites. So he throws that out there. 1 million views. He throws that out there and it's like, yeah, let the fires begin, right? Let the roasting begin. Bring your torches and let us set fire to the corpse of Alexander Dugin. I think I retweeted this. Yeah. Let's see if Dennis Taylor retweeted this. Oh, yeah. For all his critique of the West, Dugin's idea of black people is derived from the most childish interpretation of Western fetishist imagery, filtered through old-fashioned condescension. They are a simpler, purer people. Yeah, and that's something you notice coming out of Putin, coming out of uh, Eastern Europe, just anywhere that China, anywhere that people are anti-American or have an adversarial relationship to America, these based places, they nonetheless don't know. They don't know black people. They don't know the true reality of the civil rights movement in America's race relations, right? And they accept, mostly probably because it sheds a bad light on us. They kind of accept the civil rights nonsense that, that the reality of America is that white America has been unconscionably racist toward black people and that the problems of black people in America are due to white racism and them not getting a fair chance and police brutality. Indeed, the problems of black people worldwide are come from colonialism and white European repression through imperialism, colonialism, whatnot. They accept it for two reasons: because they're ignorant, they don't know black people, they haven't spent any time. Maybe they know Africans, and maybe there's a difference between black Africans and black Americans. I'm sure there's going to be some a difference between these two groups that does not really does not favor black Americans, who I think have become the worst people on earth, really. Come on, let's be honest. And I say that without rancor. I don't hate. You all know I don't hate. Not even the Jews, not even the Negroes. Though I do call these two groups out as being the two most troublesome groups in America and in the West right now. Very different groups for very different reasons. But anyway. So that's what's going on, really, is that Dugan and others, they think they have bought into the civil rights narrative because it flatters them, for one thing. And this has been the thing with Europe before they decided to destroy themselves with mass third world immigration. If you're an older guy, if you're a boomer like me, you know that for years and years, while Europe was, vastly white and not as they are now, it was a sort of a tenet of their new secular faith that Americans were horribly racist and they were not. Francois Mitterrand, I think it was Mitterrand, or whoever's French president during the LA riots of 91, maybe. He has this great quote, maybe I can find it, that I've always thought was, LA riots, see if he's in there. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, well, I'm not going to find it, but anyway. Yeah, so Mitterrand at the time said that will never happen in Europe, riots, because we're not racist. You know, and I guess they're not having mass riots because they're just throwing up their rumps in the, they're not even going to try and uh, enforce the law on their new growing black and brown populations. They're just going to leave surrender the neighborhoods to them. And for a long time, America didn't managed not to surrender entire neighborhoods over to black people. And we still haven't really. You know, we still try and enforce the law equally. Anyway, there's Dugan. That's him. And here, yeah, let it begin. No, I don't like Captive Dreamer. He's a douche, but he's in here. One of the most deranged posts I've ever seen. Somebody else offers, as a quote, "Are you retarded?" Somebody else, Nick the African Wild Dog, offers, "Mr. Dugan, have you ever heard of a PPP loan?" Kittler says, "Sounds like you've never lived around blacks." Wotan says, "The retarded boomer transcends borders." Truly. It's not boomers. I mean, anyway. Truly a destructive, spiteful sight to behold. TV worked its way through you guys like crack through the projects. I don't know if I agree with that. Screw it. Send $100 billion to Ukraine just because of this post, says Evolian. Yeah. I mean, I totally, yeah. Slava Ukraini. Can we give nukes to Ukraine? So, no, I'm kidding. Fraser Nelson's Swedish wife says, dear Mr. Dugan, this is my favorite. Dear Mr. Dugan, I hope you are well. I am a general in the Nigerian army. I received 30 million US dollars, but I can't get to it because of political unrest. I've been told to find a trustworthy foreign partner. I'm willing to pay you 40% of the total for your help. Yes, Alexander, there's a Nigerian princess that needs your help. I hear she's kind of hot, too. Yeah, anyway. Mr. Dugan, have you ever heard of the chirp? That's Matt Forney. We know Matt Forney. Um, yeah, well, it's nothing to do with the chirp. He's talking about honesty. I'm reminded of something. What the fuck? You were supposed to be charging. Oh, why are you not charging as you were instructed to charge? I guess that, yeah, I've got a new computer. Hang on a second, won't you? I gotta do something. I gotta charge back up the laptop.
Silver rings and magic things your children should not know. Evil deeds are rotten seeds, the kind that never grow. You put them in the ground, you know what you will become. I tell you, son. She traded life for happiness with no regrets at all. Left her raw with emptiness, it left her feeling small, it left her nothing there at all, except something she despised. She fell in love with lies. She's not a sinner.
손님의 하늘같은 믿음과 온정 뼈에 새기고 적에게 천리방선 소서마다에 물고기가 넘쳐나게 하리라. 한몸이 그대로 그물이 되고 추진기가 되어 원숭이의 사랑을 더 활짝 꽃피어가리라. 이것은 전국의 수산고문 일꾼들과 오르공들의 심장 속에 녹기는 불타는 기념입니다. 위대하시는 우리 원수님의 위대한 영도의 자욱은 두미의 산골 여기 장성 땅에도 뜨겁게 어려 있습니다. 산의 산마다 모루 타래를 비롯한 갖가지 산열매들이 무르익고 걸작이 마다에 집짐승 때 줄지어 흐르는 사회주의 무릉도원 장성에 아로 새겨진 절세 위인들의 사랑과 혼신의 역사, 경의하는 원수님 모시여 오늘도 끝없이 이어지고 있습니다. 평양으로부터 멀리 떨어진 나라의 북부국경 산간지대에 자리 잡고 있는 장성 땅을 몸소 찾아주신 경의하는 원수님. 지난날 지지리도 못 살던 장성군 인민들을 남부럽지 않게 잘 살게 하시려 바쳐오신 위대한 대본스님들의 크나큰 노고를 감회 깊이 되새겨보시는 경의하는 원수님의 심정은 뜨거우시었습니다. 현대적인 설비들을 갖추고 수십여 종의 산과일 제품을 생산하는 공장으로 자라나는 희한한 전변을 이룩한 장성식료 공장. 공장의 생산 공정도를 돌아보시면서 경의하는 원수님께서는 궁욕하기 그지없는 장성군을 인민의 행복꽃 피는 사회주의 선경으로 꾸려주신 위대한 대원수님들의 뜻을 받들어 황금산의 역사를 대대손손 이어가려는 장성군 인민들의 불같은 마음을 헤아려 주시었습니다. 위대한 대원스님들과 맺은 정을 핏줄처럼 간직하고 영광의 땅을 낙원으로 갖고 가는 장성 땅 인민들을 그처럼 대견해하시며 경의하는 원스님께서는 오늘의 장성이 지난날보다 많이 좋아졌는데 내일의 장성은 오늘보다 더 좋아질 것이라고 말씀하셨습니다. 앞으로 산과일 가공에서 패권을 쥐라고 하신 위대한 장군님의 말씀대로 중앙 현공업 공장들의 제품에 못지않은 과일 가공품들을 만들어내고 있는 공장 종업원들과 기념사진을 찍으시겠다고 하신 경의하는 원수님. 포도나무 능쿨 아래에 놓인 도루의자에 스스럼 없이 앉으시어 자신께서 기다리겠으니 그들을 모두 데려오라고 하시었습니다. 일본 일처가 천금같이 귀하시건만 공장의 평범한 종업원들을 기다려 사랑의 기념사진도 찍어주신 그 사랑이 고마워 식료공장의 일꾼들과 노동자들은 격정의 눈물 지으며 경의하는 원수님을 따라섰습니다. 장성군을 찾으시었던 이날 경의하는 원수님께서는 가시는 곳마다에서 뜻깊은 기념사진을 남기시었습니다. 장성 사람들을 따뜻이 한 품에 안아주시며 경의하는 원수님께서는 어디에 가나 위대한 수령님과 위대한 장군님의 혁명사상, 혁명역사가 맥박치는 장성 땅. 이 땅에서 제일 먼저 사회주의 만세소리를 울려가라고 믿음을 주시고 정을 주시었습니다.
Alright. Alright. Thank you.
자리 잡고 있는 이곳이요.
Thank you, dear leader. Yeah. Kim looks a little trim here. Is this recent? So this is a station. What is this? Peter Fairley. And he does, as you see, pirated TV from North Korea. Yeah, it's fascinating. They have their own shows and stuff, you know. It's kind of quaint, it's kind of touching, and a little pathetic maybe. But it's hard to call anything pathetic from this from where I'm sitting in the United States. I'm not looking down on anybody. I'm not. I am not operating from a great height here. But just the pictures are amazing, you know. Uh, okay, what is their anyway? That's for another time. Okay, so anyway, that's poor, stupid Alexander Dugan. Uh, yeah, it's funny. I think Tucker Carlson. Um, Tucker Carlson interviewed him not long ago, I think. Tucker Carlson's funny because he's kind of an idiot, isn't he? I like him. I don't necessarily think he's like glowy. Some people say that now. He's controlled opposition, limited hangout, whatever you want to call him. He's the guy who provides the limited hangouts. Maybe. I don't know. I think he's kind of dumb. And he's a whole other question. Maybe we'll do him as a subject someday. But just, on one hand, he's way smarter than all those his peers, at MSNBC and elsewhere. And occasionally his monologues are excellent, in that he sounds based, and he can be eloquent at times in criticizing these frankly obvious sins of the elite. But he just is so gullible in other ways that it's hard to think that he's got huge gaps in his intellect, obviously, right? Where he's really stupid about some things, like when he interviewed Kanye West. And he's got Kanye West on there, and Kanye is doing his Kanye thing, right? He sounds like this 13-year-old boy at points, and Kanye's having trouble putting together logical thoughts, right? And he's just, he's doing his Kanye thing. The Kanye we all know and love, right? And then, Tucker talks about it later. And this is why I think maybe there's something to the glowy rumors. And he's talking about, oh no, Kanye's, he's not like they say at all. He's an intelligent guy, makes sense. Well, no, that's not. I mean, he makes sense here and there, He's based black man. But there's an obvious problem with Kanye. Kanye is a psychological case. Kanye is a head case, But anyway, thank you, Alexander Dugan. We're really sorry that, that for all your evident intelligence and education, that you're just a dummy and you're of no use to us. But still, I support you, whatever it is you're up to over there in old Muscovy. All right. So, well, then let's read this. There's this guy who calls himself Semmelweis. Let's talk about the actual religion that we live under, the perverted quasi-religion, the fragmentary, incoherent religion we live under. And the way we take it, the way it is taken in by the masses, the childish and incomplete way the masses take it in. But yeah, I'm talking about hip-hop. Before we go there, though, let's just keep up with the commentary. Phil says, E. Michael Jones really thinks his Catholic nationalism will take off. Yeah, I don't know what to think of E. Michael Jones. He's written some of the best stuff. Everybody should read The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. Something else he wrote, a book length essay, I think, called Civita Catholica, which, anyways, wonderful. He's just indispensable on certain things. But then when he gets his dander up about, white identity, right? He loves to use the phrase "the white boys," and he loves to try and tweak the nose of anyone who dares talk of white advocacy. We're the white boys, and he cites that ridiculous book, How the Irish Became White, by this horrible, hateful Noel Ignatieff. Something else I tweeted recently that should have got. I should get action on Twitter, frankly. I mean, there are people who tweet just drivel who get action. I don't know what you got to do to get action on Twitter, but I tweeted recently that treason to Judaism is loyalty to humanity, because Noel Ignatieff once said that treason to whiteness is loyalty to humanity. Now, seeing as their idea of whiteness is really ill-defined and mostly refers to Western Christianity, if you think about it, and Western Christianity is exceedingly liberal and tolerant as compared to Judaism, and the only real defense that a guy like Noel Ignatieff or anybody else, secular Jew or observant Jew, whatever, the only real defense they have of Judaism's insane intolerance, its bigotry, its violence, is that they are only 3%. Right? We're only 3%, and you got no agency, William? Huh? Right? I mean, okay, you're only 3%, and nonetheless, you abide by this book. I mean, the equivalent, if America had an equivalent structure to Israel, what we would have in America is that there's this powerful and proportionally sizable part of the population that is fervently, fundamentally Christian, violently, fundamentally Christian. And that's not even really getting to the point, because being fundamentalist Jewish is to be fundamentally about Old Testament hatred, genocide, the rest of these fucking fuckers, because we're better. And to be fundamental Christian, it's really just to be very conservative about things like abortion and everything else, but you're incredibly tolerant still about who gets to be a Christian and everything else. Nonetheless, let's go with our somewhat insufficient comparison. If we had an equivalent structure in the United States, there would be this huge proportion of the population that was genuinely fundamentalist Christian that controlled the government, even though they weren't a majority, but they were a plurality. They were big enough, they voted enough, and they were outbreeding the secular part of it, and they were taken seriously, right? They had people in government like Ben Gvir in Israel, right? And the president would be either of them or had to listen to them, like Benjamin Netanyahu, though he's technically a secular Jew. He's up there talking about fucking Amalek and stuff, right? He's playing to these people, right? So secular Jews, they get away with but I'm secular, and look at all these let me cite all these great secular Jews. Many people I admire, guys like Glenn Greenwald and others. I like them. I don't think they're bad people, but anyway. They're like, yeah, so, right, yeah, well, that doesn't mean anything, because, you have this ancient text which still runs your fucking society. And I don't care that you have rifts and that they're, at the end of the day, your country, Israel, which is hugely influential on the global diaspora, is run by this fundamentalist sect. You wouldn't even call it a sect. It's like, like I said, it's a plurality of the country, not a majority necessarily, but a big enough part of the population that they can do exactly what they're doing now, which is basically controlling government, which is kind of weird because you see that Jews control our government by being wealthier and cleverer and more united, right, and just everything else that they do so masterfully well to control the West with only 3% of the population, right? Yet in their country, and again, I would put this to my secular Jewish friends, as who would offer a defense. In their country, it's the dumb, right? It's those idiot settlers. It's those fucking mind-numbingly closed-minded, frankly stupid, bullheaded people of the settler community, of the, I don't know, the ultra Orthodox, what do we call them? They're running the game. They're controlling Israel kind of the way the secular Jews control our country, right? And another thing, in Israel, you're allowed to be a secular opponent of this fundamentalist Jewry, right? But you can't be that here in America. You can't say what I just said here in America, or you'd be considered anti-Semitic. But you can be, but you can be ferociously anti-fundamentalist Christian. In fact, you're supposed to be. You can't be too nice to the fundamentalist Christians, or you'll be lumped in with them as a Nazi. And, of course, to top it all off, cherry on top, these fundamentalist Christians are all cucked out too. Those fundamentalist Israelis and Jews. God help us. God help us. God, please, forgive our stupidity. Forget the rest of it. I don't think it's sins. I mean, I don't mean forget it. You're God. You don't forget anything. I don't ask you to do. Just forgive us our stupidity, if you can, and me and Phil and Rustin and Gotta Do More, we're gonna try and cure it as best we can. Gotta Do More says, yes, Ms. Owens, our latest, greatest white spokesman. She's just like, I like her, you know what I mean? I like her, I mean, in ways, she's good, I mean, she's like openly anti-Semitic, anybody who is, and, I don't use, it's not an epithet to me. Anybody who's that has, at least partial blessing from me. But she's like Tucker. I mean, just dumb as a boot in ways. Like this whole shit with Macron's wife. Who gives a fuck? What the fuck is wrong with you, sweetheart? What the fuck? It's inexplicable. I mean, I don't even know if, it's probably not true. But honestly, even if it was true, there's nothing to be gained. There are so many fights to do, and to make yourself look like an idiot. To make yourself look like an idiot, even if it were true. I mean, this is one of those rare times when it's, normally my philosophy is the truth is always worth knowing, right? And don't try to play it. Don't try to be too cute about it, Dennis. What's the truth? Whatever the question is, the truth is always worth knowing. This is one of those rare cases what I say, is that, I don't believe it's true, though. It's just so fucking stupid. It's almost as stupid as Michelle Obama, has a big giant penis because, the way her pants folded on fucking the Ellen Show. Please, people, you're not helping. Candace, you're not helping. I mean, she's flirting with flat earth shit. She's talking about we didn't go to the moon. You're not helping. Sweetheart, no, come on. Is that husband of yours doing his duty? Is he performing his marital tasks? Because, maybe that's all you need to get a little of that head clearing, some orgasms, maybe. Well, anyway. Rustin Roar, oh, excellent. There is no Israel for me. Is that a line in submission? Yeah, we need Welbeck just to become fucking anti-Semitic. I don't think he is, but I mean, he's implicitly anti-Semitic. He does. Anyway, my friend, he's not my friend, I don't know him, but I think this guy's been out there a while. Semmelweis has written something somewhat interesting about hip-hop. Hip-hop as anti-white culture comp. I want to read through this. I haven't even read the whole thing yet. I'll say I work in a working class environment. And one of the younger guys I work with plays music a lot, and he plays it on a big speaker, because where we work, you're allowed to have like a big speaker and you can tune in your Bluetooth and just blare music loud. Not a black guy, not a white guy. And he plays a mix that is mostly hip-hop, because that's what it is now. You play hip-hop. And despite all my racism and everything, I actually like some hip-hop, some of the older stuff, just technically as music, because I like rock and roll, I even like a little bit of old blues and even a little bit of jazz. This is all very black music. So I don't really mind, the sound of hip hop. But when you're confronted with the lyrics to hip hop, right? And you just realize, again, I've said earlier, I've decided that American blacks are the worst people on earth. It's true, and they keep reminding us through hip hop. And because of our strange and inexplicably durable sort of religion, a religious tenet that comes out of civil rights, that anything that comes out of black people cannot be bad, it cannot be negative. Any genuine expression of theirs cannot be, criticized. So we developed hip hop in this remarkable thing about hip hop is that it's lyric heavy. Obviously, good hip hop like the old Wu-Tang and others. It was spare. The instrumental part was spare, and it was mostly a guy like the original rappers when this was a sort of underground hipster phenomenon. It's a guy talking on a mic. That's, one reason why the guy from Wu-Tang was so good, because he had a sort of an essentialist or a traditionalist view of hip hop, is that he didn't want too much the music to get in the way too much of the lyrics, the voice, the guy in the mic. It was this guy speaking in this rhythmic chatter, right? That was important. So anyway, I mean, the thing with hip hop is that it's all lyrics, it's all words, and there is nothing at all said, right? It's just boasting. It's just guys talking about their dick, how much pussy they get, how much money they have, and how tough they are, whatever the boat, and the boasts aren't even, the boasts don't go beyond that. So you've got this lyric heavy music that says nothing, which is astounding. But there's an obvious reason for its popularity. Semmelweis is going to get into it. We'll talk about where he's right, where he's wrong. There are 5 people, I don't care. The 5 coolest people in the world are watching right now. And those guys who dipped in for a moment and then dipped out, those are the dicks. Those are the dummies and the stupid people, and they're right now they're looking for Michelle Obama dick pics online, right? And they don't want to talk about Jewish power because they've got a whole fucking you know they've got a whole external hard drive full of Michelle Obama dick pics, right? God bless you, boys. Go, enjoy your Michelle Obama porn. All right, so let's get into it. Semmelweis begins. Whoever writes about hip hop today reveals not so much his race as his age. To like hip hop music in the 21st century reveals nothing about one's background because it is merely to like one of the most popular forms of music in the world. It has not only topped the charts in its own right, but it has influenced and changed almost every other form of pop music beside it, from rock and heavy metal to even country music, so that virtually every song shows the influence of hip-hop music and culture. What began as almost a novelty form of music and an offshoot of the larger downtown art scene in 1970s New York has gone global and now informs the popular music of a large percentage of nations and cultures. Yeah, and rock and roll used to occupy this ground for the same reasons. It's black people doing what they do best, vulgar, rhythmic, and I don't say vulgar as an epithet, popular, simple, popular, crude, but superior rhythmic music that works better than any sort of folk, because pop music is ultimately folk music, and it appeals far more broadly than any sort of folk tradition from anywhere else, including from Africa. In fact, popular music, people don't realize that when they think about classical and popular, and a lot of people, like I saw somebody say, oh, Mozart would never deign to like Grimes. Grimes actually does some good music. And I realized, no, that guy's a fool. It might be a shame to think that Mozart might like hip hop. I didn't even want to think about it. But Mozart and all of those guys, they heard the folk music of their time. That's the popular music of their time, and there's a lot of it they liked. They incorporated it into their work over and over again. Dvorak, in fact, came to America and incorporated the black music of the time into, what was it, New World Suite, New World Symphony, whatever that was. Anyway, which is great, by the way. Anyway, since, this is Semmelweis again, as its practitioners have always insisted, hip-hop is not merely a musical genre, but an entire culture. It has the ability to create fundamental changes in a society that imports or adopts it. Hip-hop attaches itself to a host culture and changes that culture to accommodate itself. It does not change. This is not true, but I'll get into that. It does not change. It slowly makes the host culture change. Witness the remarkable uniformity of global hip-hop music and fashion. Wherever it is found, one sees the same clothing styles, the same values, the same attitudes, the same body language, and of course the same music. From America to Brazil to France to Eastern Europe to China and Japan. Only the language being rapped in is different. Yeah, I could edit this for you Semmelweis. Punk rock had a similar uniformity but never achieved the global reach or musical dominance that hip-hop has. I don't know why he's talking about punk rock. Talk about rock and roll. That's the similarity. You know. Yeah, of course punk rock never had. Of course punk rock was largely about trying to ring. Yeah, you can see punk rock as a failed attempt to wring the black influence back out of, to whiten rock and roll. It was a response to disco. It was a response to R&B. It was a response to the rock and roll of the time. One of the guys from the Ramones said, what's our style? Our style is is something like that, to wring out all the black influence. Say it, in a bad way. Just, this is what we were trying to make it whiter. The Ramones, and and I see it, especially with better punk rock. Not, the Sex Pistols, though. Nevermind the Bollocks is a very important album if you think of albums as being important. But the musicianship was horrible, and that's one reason why punk rock wasn't going to get there, because it's not going to have the broad appeal of something like rock, now hip hop. It's I can listen to a record like Nevermind the Bollocks and still enjoy parts of it. Ironically, from a snobbish point of view, like, I don't need it to sound quote unquote good, right? It's gotta just sound interesting, and in fact, there's something to be said for the crudity of it. But there is, of course, there's punk rock that had a high degree of musicianship, that still, it's never going to appeal the way that simple hip-hop beats will appeal. Anyway, Semmelweis continues, whether or not you personally like hip-hop or, quote, get it, unquote, is of no consequence, because hundreds of millions, if not billions, of others around the world do like it and do get it, or at least they think they get it. I'm glad you added that. They think they get it, want to get it, want to be down and cool. Yeah, and I have to look to myself when I think this. They don't get it, right? Like my non-white, non-black friend at work blaring this music from these people that would hate him if they knew him. They're glad to take his money, but they don't like him any more than they like me. Does he get it? He doesn't really think about it. He gets the basic outlines, and Semmelweis will go into this effectively later in this. But there's no getting it, which is part of the appeal. You don't have to think much about it. And I think about this idea of getting it or not getting it. Well, I realized that right well into middle age, I was taking in film without getting it for real, I mean, I had seen so many things that I understood on a surface level, or just I got down into it a little bit, or I got down, this is the worst part, to the extent that the author wanted me to get, but he had other subterranean things still, what's the word? Not, anyway, there was more meaning there than I got. And so I grew up watching Jewish films being spoken to in their language and not understanding, the extent to which what they were doing was taking down the culture that I was losing, that I didn't even know I lost, that I was happy to ignore, say happy to ignore. I didn't even know I was ignoring it. I was ignorant of it entirely, because I was this deracinated boomer child in 70s and 80s United States of America. It's shameful. I hate myself for it. It's one of the regrets of my life, that it took me so long to come around, right? But this is the way you have to think that most people will take to their grave. They will just accept. This is the key part. whether it's hip hop or it's movies, whatever it is, people are going to accept, even if it was it's like if you were in a tribe in the pre-industrial age, you took whatever the folk tradition was because it's all you knew. And people will not imagine much, maybe few rare people, geniuses or evil geniuses or good geniuses, a few rare people will imagine something entirely different from what they already know. But maybe no one does, really, truly. The most revolutionary mind can only imagine of transforming what they have in their tradition, whether it's the folk tradition or now the global tradition. It's in the same way you can never truly get outside of yourself and think objectively about yourself. You cannot step outside of yourself and view yourself as just another person. Truly, you can attempt it, you can approach it. Maybe there's benefit and enlightenment to be found in the exercise of this attempt, but you'll never actually do it. You'll never actually step out of your ego, right? You can't. Likewise, kids now, I mean, hip hop is what it is. And if they were growing up in another time and it wasn't hip hop, it was rock and roll, or it was, the big band era. That's what they would take as natural, and anyway, nobody thinks about it, nobody gets it, and that's the worst part. They think they get it, or they talk about getting it, and the idea of getting it, being cool, being hip now is kind of ironic, because to be hip now is to be fooled. To get it is to be a person who wants to be part of it's to be conformist. It's to say, yeah, I know I'm listening to this idiot who can only talk about his dick and his bank account. They don't even talk about bank accounts, right? They carry around wads of cash. I mean, this horrible human being, right, who's just the worst, right? Whatever. And it's also stupid, and and he thinks, I get it, means no, I get it now means I tolerate it, I accept it, right? And if you're some old fogey who says, has the lack of hipness to say, gee, this is all rather stupid, right? And I think a little evil, oh, you don't get it, right? The idea of cool and hip has transformed. They've had to transform, and maybe they were always bullshit. The idea of cool and hip was always that you had a better point of view than the average schmuck, right? You had a superior point of view because you were stepping outside of things to consider them from an objective perspective, right? And the square was just a conformist who just took what was given him. Well, it's pretty funny now, right? So the hipster, the hip hop fan, the young people are all extreme conformists who define their conformity as cool and hip and getting it. Anyway, let's get back to Semmelweis. Whether or not you personally like hip-hop or get it is of no consequence, because hundreds of millions, if not billions of others around the world do like and do get it, or at least they think they get it, want to be down and cool. There's a genealogical line from the ideas of quote-unquote cool and quote-unquote hip in the 1940s and 50s jazz scene through hip-hop culture and its influence first on white Americans and then on the entire world. The creation of new musical forms such as blues, jazz, rock and roll, and hip-hop, and a cultural scene and ethos built around them have been Black America's strongest rhetorical weapons in their ongoing argument or battle with white America. I wouldn't even describe it as that, but okay. The influence of Black intellectuals like Booker T. Washington or Webb Du Bois or their modern descendants like Henry Louis Gates and Cornel West, trained in white schools and essentially speaking the conceptual language of white culture, has always been rather minimal. They are applauded by white liberal book readers, perhaps influence a few politicians, but they have no impact on culture. No, in fact, you'll see these guys, some of them being older guys might start out as against hip hop. Some of them, like Jesse Jackson before, will criticize it. They'll see the poor example that the rappers and that the hip hop culture gives of black. Some of them will retain some of the old notions that black people would become, like the Cosbys, middle class, prosperous, responsible, truly successful, doctors and thinkers, genuine thinkers, not these idiots like Henry Louis Gates. But you've seen them all over time give in, and now we're down to where, any of them that are old enough to have ever opposed it, even before, are dying off, like Jesse Jackson and the other old guys. Hip hop won, and it did not just defeat bourgeois white culture. It defeated what was previously considered revolutionary black culture. It defeated the civil rights movement, oddly enough. The abolitionist movement wasn't catalyzed by a speech or essay, but by the novel Uncle Tom's Cabin. The civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s would not have succeeded without rock and roll, which was the first cultural phenomenon to draw large mixed audiences who came to see a mix of stars who were both black and white. Yeah, this is key. You wouldn't have had the civil rights, and you wouldn't have had our acceptance of the riots, which were a big part of the 60s civil rights movement. The big riots of the summer, the summers came, and then following that, like clockwork, came Congress, conceding things, passing so-called civil rights bills to appease the rioters. When Andrew Breitbart said that politics is downstream from culture, he was simply rephrasing what the Italian communist Antonio Gramsci had realized 100 years before. But whereas Gramsci theorized a long march through the institutions, and his followers then put it into practice by systematically infiltrating and taking over Western academia, the real power has lain in what Theodore Adorno called the, quote, culture industry, unquote. In the 20th century, it has been the audiovisual arts that have influenced culture, and in turn politics, more than anything else. In this ongoing culture war, hip-hop has been one of the primary weapons against white and Western culture ever since its ascendancy at the very end of the 20th century. What Jonathan Bowden said of Islam, that it represents a large banner under which many disparate peoples can rally together, quote, against the West, unquote, excuse me, is doubly true of hip-hop, which requires no proclamation of religious faith and which prizes hipness over piety. Yeah, I don't know about that. Because, like I said, my non-white, non-black hip-hop friend is not against the West at all, he's just a regular guy, of an Americanized, non-white, non-black person. Hip-hop isn't itself really allied against the West. And you see it. There's literally no political hip-hop left. There's that midget. What's his name? The midget rapper, not the guy from Ghetto Boys. No, he's considered the best ever, and my friend has this guy in his playlist. He sucks. He did the Super Bowl show. Anyway, he's political, but again, I've been hearing a lot of this hip hop, right? I've been hearing it, and there's there's no political content at all, except in that. Somebody remind me who that asshole is. You know, the guy who did They Not Like Us, right? That guy. Beside him, and you can't even really suss it out of the, you know what I mean? It's in the lyrics, but I mean, I can't even pick out. I know he's political because I've read about the asshole, but you don't even hear it in the lyrics. No, I mean, it's all like apolitical. It's all thoroughly narcissistic, of course. Anyway, nonetheless, it's become the soundtrack to that anti-white stuff. You know, it's weird. And we were talking about Dugan before, how Dugan is, he's not really against the West. I think his thing is we're going to regenerate the West here in Russia, that's his philosophy. But people who are against the West just naturally accept the civil rights narrative, which is obvious bullshit. People in countries where they're way more racist, quote unquote, than we are, people in countries where they hate black people, and most of the Arab world, for instance, where black people do not, they don't enjoy the privileged place they have in our society, I tell you that. They will still, these people, because people, all of us, we're just naturally inborn hypocrites, but they'll accept it because it's anti-American. It's just a way to get us. It's just a way at us, right? And if you're Arab Muslim, you have your beefs with America that really have nothing to do with black Americans or civil rights, but you're going to use it. I always think of that, there's that astounding piece of Nazi propaganda which shows this monstrous creation, right? Walking. Does anybody know what this is called? And it represents America, right? And it represents all the bad things as the Nazis see it about America, and this monstrosity, this thing. It's made of different elements, right? It's walking, but you know, it's made of different elements that, Jewish influence is one of the elements. And then another one is jazz music. Jazz was the thing back then, and jazz was seen as the degenerate black American export, right? And of course, alongside jazz music being this evident evil coming out of America and the West, was also the KKK, right? So and racism, right? So, I mean, this is even a conception of a Nazi propagandist sought to include, and I don't think it was entirely disingenuous on the person's part, you know. I do think there were Nazis at the time who would have never had anything to do with black people necessarily, who nonetheless would be all too glad to include, a denunciation of American racism in their critique of us. Just because, again, we're all hypocrites, and none of us, ever really puts things together, especially not when we're going after our enemies. We're only too glad to ignore the contradictions, right? Oh, see you later, Gada. Thank you, Gada. All right. Gotta do more said. Bummer for me finding out how many of my rock and roll heroes were Jewish. Never cared until I did. Yeah, it's kind of depressing to find out. Um, you know. Gotta do more says the E state will have statues in honor of many. K. McDonald, one for sure. Phil the Kill says rap is also the only genre of music I can think of that welcomes selling out. If you do a Sprite commercial, it's getting that bag. Getting money for all other acts is considered being a fraud. This is important. Yeah, right. And so hip hop it should be, this stance should be, we're authentic, we're of the street, yada yada yada. Yet, as you see, hip hoppers are the worst about selling out, and they'll fashion every rationalization. I mean, look at Snoop Dogg, right? Snoop Dogg, such a joke. He's just out there. You pay him enough money, he'll sell fucking Kotex. He'll sell feminine hygiene products if they pay him enough. I guarantee you. Yeah, the new Snoop Dogg, right? Tampaks with the new Snoop Dogg. Yeah. Anyway, there's Snoop Dogg wine, right? Yeah, because it's all rationalization. Think about it. It started out, it wasn't all gangster rap at first. Remember, but what is black culture right now? It's rationalizing a debased state, right? Civil rights came along, and the assumption was, oh, evil white people, you're just not giving blacks a chance. You better let them on the, seat at the table, right? Let them into the schools and let them into the corporate office where they're going to do as well or better than you're doing with things, right? That was the idea. They're going to, they're going to rise. Well, that became clear early on. It was clear to the so-called racists before. That was never going to happen. There was a reason for their place here in America. There was a reason that they are descended from people who were brought here to pick cotton. There was a reason that they were the subjects of the Atlantic slave trade and not somebody else, because they were not, for whatever for whatever reason, because they were not as intelligent, they were not as able. They were taking people who were, like some like to say, people who skipped the Iron Age, right? Taking these people, these hunter-gatherer folk, who had less culture than the Native Americans that we displaced when we took over the North America, right? And bringing them over to pick cotton, thinking that was going to be great. Yeah, thank you, South. You're so smart. Don't take shit from Southerners. Rather than trying to act like you Yankees, you ruined everything because you assholes wanted your little fucking pastoral paradise, right, with black slaves, and you thought that was going to be things forever. Even if you didn't have the abolitionist movement in the North, it was not going to. Slavery is untenable. It's not going to last in the West, and it is. I put it to you, despite our disregard of black ability and everything else. It is, I put it to you, inherently evil, inherently wrong, and obviously unchristian, and it's not. It's a tradition that the West left behind. Southerners saying, "Oh yeah, no, you ruined everything by bringing these people here and by breeding them here, and by keeping them, here in their state until they, the idiots from the North freed them, and they are now ruining everything. Now they're just destroying everything. Yeah, so don't fucking talk to me. By the way, I'm Californian, but don't give me any shit about Yankees. Just shut the fuck up. Yeah, right. I mean, who was the worst? Who was worst off? Slaves were not worst off in the Old South. The worst position to be in the Old South, obviously, was a poor or a working white person, literally competing with slave labor. Literally competing with slave labor. Slave labor, chattel slavery in the Old South was, it was just like, offshoring and globalization before that became an option. So don't talk shit to me. Wave that fucking. I like the flag. I mean, but don't talk shit to me. Southerners, just shut the fuck up. I understand that you ruined things. You're like the left hand. The abolitionists are right hand. You're the left hand, and you all fucked everything up. You fucked everything up. So please stop it. Besides, the guys who who have Confederate flags and will talk like that are just not descended from the slave owners. They're descended from the poor whites, more likely, far more likely to be descended from the working class whites who were displaced by this slavery. So don't talk shit to me, South. Sorry, Rustin. Louisiana, you're cool. Yes, Phil, rationalizing a debased state, and that's what hip hop has been. You know, it went from, frankly, being apolitical to being this gangster rap thing, which started out kind of apolitical, like I don't give a fuck, to becoming what it is now. Instead of, oh, we're going to do something about crime, we're going to do something about our appalling ignorance, our dependence on government welfare. No, let's rationalize it, right? Like, what was one of the first things that come out of the civil rights movement culturally was this idea that the black criminal was revolutionary at heart. That's all it really is. He's not allowed to earn an honest money. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it written this stupidly. Somebody said, I forget who the particular black thug of celebrity, a guy who was on death row and who became a cause celeb for a while. And he wrote a couple of books, a couple of shitty books. So everybody's trying to praise him like they do with black people. Oh, he's a genius, because he wrote a couple of shitty books. And somebody said, this guy would be a CEO of a company if America wasn't so racist. But instead, he had to be, the founder of the Crips. You remember him. California executed him. One of the last executions, probably there. Yeah, but he was forced to found the Crips because he couldn't be CEO of Coca-Cola. This is what we're up against. This is the level of stupidity against which we are allied. Sorry about the mangled English. Phil says, in my defense, I'm a Yankee by birth. I had no say in the matter. LOL, I love the Dixie flag, but it would be fake of me to wave it. Yeah, I like it as a symbol of our resistance, in the present. And really, it doesn't go beyond, despite everything I've said about slavery and this, the South, they had a right to secede. I still think they were been treated badly by the North and by Reconstruction. But yeah, honestly, the stars and bars for me are just a symbol of resistance, and to the extent it triggers people, yeah, I would wave the flag. I probably should get one. Okay. Anyway, Semmelweis continues, hip-hop is not limited or reducible to a mere political discourse, nor even to just a form of music. Nonetheless, it can be and has been used as a vehicle to spread political ideas, and it has proven to be one of the most effective instruments of mass political rhetoric to emerge in the last 100 years. The evidence for that is the amount of cultural change it has wrought globally, but especially in the United States. The reasons why it has long been able to do this are simple: the powers of rhythm, repetition, and aesthetics. A song is a mnemonic device. Just ask a grade school teacher. If you like a song, you listen to it over and over again. You memorize the words, even if you don't try to. If you don't think about what those words mean, all the better. Straight to the subconscious. I don't necessarily agree with this paragraph. Like I said, hip-hop, the most effective hip-hop is completely apolitical. But, perhaps it simply demonstrates, not that the personal is political, the social is political. And politics are downstream of sociology, of social change, right? And think about women's rights. Women's rights only came about because technology allowed it to. When it was virtually impossible for a woman to work outside the house, it was virtually impossible for families to form. It kind of is now, but at one point people actually wanted to form families. when it was virtually impossible to have family formation with women working, or and this is funny because feminism began in opposition to this. Women working was degrading on the family. It is impoverishing on the family. It was, it made family formation harder. Until technology came along to make it possible, we had washing machines and automation, and we had, you know, necessity for cleaning and preparation of food no longer took hours and hours out of the day. All of these things added up. That corporate America, as they discovered in World War II, they had all this surplus labor just laying there, waiting to be brought out. It had to be released, though. It had to be released from its sociological bounds, right? Women had to be brought into the workhorse, and it's still a thing. So they come out to work during World War II while we're stupidly wasting all our young males and in a disgusting war. And out the women come to work and they don't want to go home after after they get a taste of it. And after that, the post-world, up through the civil rights movement, black civil rights came first, then female civil rights, feminism. And the great force behind it that doesn't get acknowledged is that it was really about taking advantage of this surplus labor to drive wages down. Once, and it's still a thing that once you get women competing with men for wages, they would drive wages down. I mean, from one simple aspect is that you increase the labor force, right? There's more labor for companies to hire. That's going to, in and of itself, supply and demand means that lowers the wages. But also women are willing to work for less. And when these feminists cite, so-called wage gaps and class ceilings in this, aside from the fact that they're comparing apples and oranges, they're not, they're comparing all these women working these mid to lower level menial jobs because they will for less than guys. Aside from that, women won't demand higher wages. Women won't have the same demands placed on them. A woman working outside of the house is still not expected to contribute as much to a house as a husband working outside the house. Women don't need to make as much, so they'll ask for less for the same job. More often than not, they're not as good at it, so they'll ask for less. And women still, despite all their unfortunate assertiveness in our time, still being women, they still retain some of their female charm in that they don't want to be difficult and ask for more money. They're not as ready as guys to demand more wages. So it's all been, the great unspoken, unrecognized force behind feminism has largely been, again, like behind everything, slavery, mass immigration, outsourcing, right? It's a fucking business world, the capitalist, yes, business world, and it's never-ending hunger for ever cheaper labor. That, if you want to look for a taproot for all of our many, many problems, that is one of them that has to be accounted for. And that's my capitalist critique. I don't want to hear that nonsense Marxism. That's my critique of capitalism. Of course, it's not original. There are many of us out here who recognize this now. Yeah. Back to Semmelweis. Ideas which 30 years ago were limited to the fringe discourses of black nationalists. Semmelweis thinks that the political hip-hop is never, it's not, no. Semmelweis, that it works, again, it works so effectively because it's not political. I mean, the most boring hip hop has always been the very political hip hop, the Roots, right? Highly regarded group, successful, very political, thoroughly political, better than objectively musically better than their peers. I don't know if they still record, right? Talk about selling out. They were doing, I guess they're doing not Kimmel, but some other fucking late night talk show. Uh, they were always horribly boring. I mean, just, and I don't see black, you never see black people like talking about the Roots and just pretentious black, so-called political black hipster types, right? No, no. And it's precisely because it's not political that makes it so effective, Semmelweis, because it doesn't give a shit about politics. Semmelweis will get, he'll get it, to use the expression, in a moment here. Hang on, I'm going to get coffee. Be right back. I mean, I have, it's right here. Hang on. We have coffee. The coffee nut. All right. Yeah, good coffee. All right. All right. Anyway, back to Semmelweis. Let's give Semmelweis his due. This is a good essay. Ideas which 30 years ago were limited to the fringe discourses of black nationalism and Afrocentrism, including an entire revisionist history of human life and civilization, have moved to the mainstream of social discourse. Have they? I don't think they have, actually. We're all, white people are doing what they've always done. They're politely ignoring the stupidity of black thought. They're polite, or they're just not seeing it. The duller whites just don't see it, and they just, they're like me when I was in catechism. I mean, they're just going right through them. But more intelligent, aware whites they've so internalized that long necessity. That necessity we've had again since the civil rights movement, since white people remembered it. Vast majority of whites before the 60s had no real experience of black people, so they were susceptible to the assumption that black people were generally the same level of intelligence. Or if they thought of, this is the long thing, something I've long thought, that to the extent that people see it, they think that any biological differences in intelligence are not so great that they can't be ignored, right? If they weren't as great as they are, right? You could ignore them. And a talented tenth would emerge from black people, and they also thought that a good deal of this gap in intelligence between us had to do with education, the nurture argument. So that's so 60s came, civil rights came, and all of a sudden these people, desegregation. And all of a sudden, white people are confronted with the reality of black Americans. And they had to start rationalizing things. They had to learn. And it's pathetic and frightening, really, frankly, to learn that with this necessity placed upon the average white person, the average white Christian or Christian descended person, the ability to ignore, the ability to endure cognitive dissonance, the ability to learn to not see. There needs to be a word for learning to not see, right? Learned ignorance, that sort of habitual ignorance, like that. And what I'm talking about in my shitty way is that we learned without thinking about it necessarily to ignore black stupidity, and these ideas of black nationalism, Afrocentrism, the blacks, Nation of Islam shit. It's all rather embarrassing. I'm sure some smarter black people find it a little embarrassing, but they've learned themselves by the same process to ignore just how stupid it is, right? It's part and parcel of our overestimation of any example of black intelligence, like this Thomas Sowell effect, right? Oh my God, he's a genius, he's made sense. Right? He said something thoroughly unoriginal, something that's been said 100 times before, but it's true, they too, the black people have black intellectuals, and there are some who have awareness, but it's astounding what a low rank they are intellectually. They've had to make this rationalization too. And anyway, that's what's happening, and it's still happening. So this stuff, to the extent, like I said, I'm hearing hip hop every day at work. I don't mind. I just mind that when I come near the speaker, I often have to come near the speaker and talk to people. I'm like, what the fuck? We can't hear each other. But that's a different problem. Like I said, to the extent I'm hearing the lyrics coming through, that's what's hit me, because I haven't been listening to hip hop, obviously. I listened to it before. I was there for Wu-Tang. I still think that first Wu-Tang album is really good. Objectively speaking, as music. Like I used to say, I wouldn't piss on these guys if I was on fire. If he was on fire. I wouldn't piss on RZA if he was on fire, but he is a hell of a producer. I don't know why people can't take that. That's another thing. People surrender. And this has been part of the story. And talk about social factors being well ahead, well upstream of political factors. And that's what Semmelweis still doesn't quite get here. Another thing, and maybe it's a European thing. Oh, black people have their own reasons for this, but for whites, if Muhammad Ali is the best boxer, then his nonsensical ideas about the Nation of Islam shit, whatnot, must be given some credence, all right? So if RZA and the guys at Wu-Tang have produced this remarkable record that I enjoy so much, then all the lyrical nonsense within it, and it is astounding how much is nonsense, must have some value, right? It's kind of what Semmelweis was talking about in the previous paragraph. Rhythm, rhyme, these are things by which children learn. And you have to keep in mind that for black people, they actually think rhyme is reason. They actually think that if you put something in not elegant, but in a rhythmic way, if you make a rhyme, it's like Johnny Cochran saying, if the glove does not fit, you must acquit. Black people think that's logic. They think of that the way that a lot of black people, maybe not all, you get plenty of sensible black people, I think, who know it's BS, but you get the dumb half of black people is like way dumber than the dumb half of white people, and so the dumber half, and lots of them, they hear Johnny Cochran saying, if the glove does not fit, you must acquit. They react to that the way that a white person reacts when he says, I must admit that's a good point, right? That's the way they react. They think rhyme is reason. They think putting things, not an interesting way, in an elegant way. I want to say elegant. That's not what I'm looking for, but you know what I mean. right? That's why you got this nonsense around MLK, right? That awful. And I always say it actually helps MLK's image, his legacy, that you that his family controls the rights to his speeches, the recordings, and the greedy bastards, you have to pay them. This is a unique situation too. Like anybody else, it would be public record stuff, but you have to pay, royalties to the King family if you want to like play one of his speeches on the radio. So we don't hear it that much, which actually works toward the mythology of MLK. Because if people actually heard that shit, if you had to endure that, and I guess you do probably in school, but if you heard that more often than you do, you would realize this is nonsense, and this is cringe, right? That horrible sing-song voice, and it's so overblown, pretentious, and anyway. But that's what, that's a very black thing, thinking that, if I say it like I'm singing it, that's logic to them, They didn't invent logic. They didn't encounter anything like the rules of logic. I'm not saying that black people are completely illogical, because logic wasn't invented, it was just recognized. Nonetheless, if you come up from a culture that has no reverence for logic, that had no science around it, that didn't, examine the idea of logic, I'm sure that African languages had approximate words for logic. Maybe they didn't have words for logic, but they kind of at least approached the idea of logic, I mean, no society develops a language without having some sense of logic, capital L, logic. Nonetheless, it's so attenuated in them, and it remains that. Oswald, so good to see you. Do you like Eminem, Dennis? I have to confess, he did some good work. Now, there, Eminem's a good case, see? He's a good case study. 'Cause the guy himself is kind of an idiot, right? I mean, he thoroughly, you couldn't imagine a bigger cuck, right? So he's out there and he's talking nonsense. Like when BLM was happening, right? He was probably supportive and everything else. This is a guy who would get his ass kicked. He got beaten so savagely by a black classmate that he was in the hospital. He's got something like Stockholm syndrome. But I got to admit, the work is good. And this is he's a classic example, the same way that Wu-Tang is a bunch of, like I said, it wouldn't piss on one of these guys if they were on fire. But enter the, how many chambers, I always forget the number. Enter the 36 chambers, whatever the fuck it is. Despite the fact that the lyrics are, these are idiots, and these guys are like idiots, really. I mean, they're just fucking worse than idiots. They're evil idiots, right? Nonetheless, objectively, as a music lover, I have to sit and think. And there are conceptually brilliant things about the album. The motif of having the clashing sword sounds, right, and all the samples from the kung fu movies that they use. It's absolute genius, But anyway, Eminem, from a white point of view, because what I'll say for Eminem, like there are probably a few white rappers, I can't even think of many though, who basically try to mimic the black guys, right? Let me just pretend to be tough and pretend to be down and all that shit. And that's cringe, right? But you see what Eminem did. He decided, I'm just going to write about my life, and here I am. I'm this fucked up kid from this fucked up white trash kid. I can relate to that. And I'm just going to write about my life, and I've had this fucked up relationship with a woman, and I've got a daughter. I want to be there for her, and it's hard for me to be there for my daughter because this bitch You know, he had a lot to say, and he was fearless in saying it. And you know, you got to view Eminem as an early sort of incel figure. You know, that album he had where he, but again, I say this with advisedly. I say this with reserve. At the same time, this records, the lyrics, and it's notable that you know of all the stupid black lyrics, political rap, gangster rap, right? This you know it's just such a low level of lyricism, right? Music, poetry, literature, whatever you're talking about. This is just bottom feeder fucking lyricism, right? And then here's this white dude, this white guy, Eminem, who's actually writing interesting lyrics. And they're actually, you know, I mean, I won't say it's Shakespeare, but it's interesting in content, it's interesting in presentation, right? Um, it's like fucking a level above just almost every black rap. I can't think of another a black rapper that does better lyrics than Eminem. You know, eventually they're going to destroy Eminem in the whole hip hop world because oh, where the hell did it go? Because you know they're not going to be able to allow Eminem to be there and enjoying, you know what I mean? The reality of this, that the embarrassment of this, that black people, like I was saying earlier, here's this art form that is it's word heavy, yeah, right? It's just all lyrics. It's lyrical heavy, right? And there's not a single interesting thought that has ever been expressed in black hip hop. I don't care what you say. I mean, people talk about Jay-Z is a genius. No, he isn't. And, you know, that fat guy, right? Fucking, you know, the fat guy and the other guy who killed each other. I always forget the names. Never a fucking interesting thing. At the best, Jay-Z, the best he's ever done is have something slightly clever, you know, slightly clever turn of a phrase is the best. That's the high point of Jay-Z's lyricism. But then there's this guy, Eminem, and he's doing this again. There's another contradiction here that I cannot resolve. I say, yeah, the lyrics are good, the music's good, and the music's good in no small part, of course, due to Dr. Dre. But I mean, it's all Dr. Dre musically, but the lyrics are good and they're interesting and they're timely and they're speaking to this huge problem between the, you know what I mean? Eminem was kind of ahead of his time again, like an incel figure, talking about the impossibility of human relationships with women in our time. That record where he kills his wife, she's in the trunk of the car, and he's like driving off a cliff. Again, there's a contradiction here. I cannot approve of this. This is degenerate. I understand it's degenerate, but it's also brilliant, and again, it's relevant. Anyway, that's my take on my man. You know, and to top it all off, though, like I said, I'll praise him advisedly there, but also to top it all off, he seems like the biggest dick. You know, it's like the Jewish comic behind Triumph the Insult Dog once said. What's his name? I'm forgetting names. He said of Eminem, you know, he's just pissed off. He's the only rapper with a small penis. Oh, wait, I forgot about Missy Elliott. Anyway. Phil says Eminem was never allowed to say nigga in his raps and he knows it, the pussy. Yeah, that's funny. Oswald says, I thought Slim Shady hit menopause by now. Yeah, he is, basically, right? He went there early. I think BLM induced the male menopause in Slim Shady. Phil the Kill says, they swear the Irish were the previous blacks. No, they never were considered that low from what I've read. Ethnic European bickering, yes. Thought of as a black, no. No, they weren't. And it just shows that, obviously Germans, Brits, Italians, Spaniards, all these different nations had their bigotries and their bias against one another, and they all might have rated one another, right? I'm sure, you know, plenty of them in the West had awful views of Slavs. These guys are pigs, they're crude pigs, they're not, yeah. None of that means that we thought they were black any more than Cheddar Man is. We deserve to die. I'm sorry, God. I don't know when the giant fireball comes, so we deserve it. I accept it. This is when I decided humanity deserves to die. When the Cheddar Man controversy happened, and everybody's arguing, even guys on our side, we're arguing about whether or not Cheddar Man had dark skin, and nobody points out that if he had dark skin, it would not make him African one bit. It would make him no more African. So what the fuck are we having this stupid conversation for? And the most idiotic of the idiotic people, of course. Oh, Cheddar Man may have had darker skin, ergo we're all black. That's the dumbest. Obviously, you can't get any dumber than that. You know what I mean? You're descending into stupidity, and boom, you're on the sea floor. Mariana's Trench of stupidity there. But still, the response was equally stupid. Like, oh no, he wasn't black. Or no. Could somebody please stand up and shut up, you idiots? Because I've heard this long before Cheddar Man. There is the notion that once Europeans had darker skin because they needed to at some point, again, and we were able to discuss these possibilities back then because we weren't, we're getting dumber. Socially, we're getting dumber, right? We just get stupider every fucking day. Anyway, yeah. So it's not such a bad thing that the Earth is coming to an end. Stupidity too will die. Beauty will die. Imagination will die. All these amazing things, right? These amazing potentials of the mind will all pass, but at the same time, all this stupidity, like of hip hop and everything else, Cheddar Man, it will die. And that, God has his plan, Anyway, back to Semmelweis. I got to get this done. We've got to stop. Oswald says at least Eminem wasn't a hipster like that, not like all the not terrible white rappers that followed him. Yeah, who's the guy who's from here in Seattle? Macklemore. I mean, that's bottom barrel. That's the worst. Macklemore is the worst. Because Eminem, I don't know. He's just trying. Yeah. He's kind of a douche, but I mean, it doesn't really seep into his music. It didn't seep into his music when he was popular. And I remember when that Slim Shady track came out, like I wasn't against hip hop at the time. I thought, this is good. This is really good. Even then, in that track, he didn't go as deep as he did later when he was writing that crazy stuff. Whatever the album is where he where he samples Dido and all that, yeah. Even though that was just a fun song, just a shallow, fun song, even that one is better than 90% of the black rap that's out there. Like I said, they're going to destroy him at some point. At some point, black hip hop will at some point excise him. It's just too embarrassing. Okay, let's try and finish this. Ideas which 30 years ago were limited to the fringe discourses of black nationalism and Afrocentrism, including an entire revisionist history of human life and civilization, have moved to the mainstream of social discourse. No, they haven't. And hip-hop has been the primary vehicle that brought them there. In the same way that Oliver Stone's film about the JFK assassination popularized a conspiratorial view of that event more effectively than decades of critical books and documentaries, I'm not sure that's even true. It is hip-hop that has spread the message and worldviews of the Nation of Islam, the Five Percenters, and other black militant groups, which can variously be labeled extremist, black, supremacist, or just anti-white. I'm not sure that's the case. Again, I'm hearing this music every day. And I don't really see that Nation of Islam, Five Percenters, and all this shit. It's really getting anywhere. It's not really growing. It's just baked in. The Five Percenters, also called the Nation of Gods and Earths. No, it's Earths. Yeah, they always say gods and Earths. Is an offshoot of the Nation of Islam that was formed in the late 1960s. If you don't know who they are or what they believe, there's plentiful information online. You know, dude, this is like so early aughts. Let's dive into Nation of Islam theology. We know it's idiocy. We know it's fucking scraping the barrel stupidity. It's not, you know. Anyway, 100 years ago, no one would claim that European peoples have no identity or culture of their own, or that they stole all their achievements from Africa and other non-white cultures, that they are, as a Nation of Islam states, quote, a race of devils, unquote. Yet today, this is an increasingly prominent view in the public mind, is it? Especially among young people, among young black people. Thanks in no small part to the spread of hip-hop music and culture. I don't know if I can continue with this shit. All right. Yeah, anyway, I thought it was good when I started it. It's promising. I mean, he gets into it later here when he talks about the minstrel show. That's a favorite subject of mine, something I've talked about before. This idea that the minstrel shows were this anti-black thing, that the minstrel shows were there to make fun of black people. Black, hence that's, why blackface is this horrible, horrible thing. Not true. The early minstrel shows were co-opting black music. They were literally cultural appropriation. There were black minstrel shows, for one thing. There were blacks who did minstrel shows, and then there were white performers who wanted to get in on the act. And the idea of blackface was to present it as to the audience as here's authentic black music, which was not so readily available, obviously, in a time when even radio wasn't a big thing. Or even, I think it begins before radio was even really invented. So white people were already craving this music, right? That's what it was. And that, the early minstrels, the blackface minstrelsy, was like Elvis Presley. It was, okay, let's bring black music to the masses, sort of phasing it in kind of way. In the same way that Elvis, brought rock and roll, because there's no black guy, they weren't going to allow some black guy to do it. They barely allowed Elvis to do it. But Elvis, contrary to black people who hate Elvis because he cultural appropriation, Elvis is a very important figure in black history, in this history that Semmelweis was talking about, and that he was, he brought the poison. He was just this dumb hillbilly who didn't know any better. He was well-intended. To him, it was just fun, joyous music. But what it was he was bringing the plague. He was bringing us the plague. Likewise, early minstrelsy and the blackface minstrels were just, they would advertise themselves to this. Come hear authentic African music, they would call it. So, here he quotes a guy named Peter van der Merwe. The craze for the, quote, nigger minstrels, unquote, of the 1840s set a pattern that was later to be repeated several times over. See, there was a craze in the 1840s. I didn't even realize it goes back that early. In the 1840s, there was popular desire in white American, horribly racist white American, to hear this music that they liked, that was unique to them, and that was, popular, easy to enjoy, rhythmic music. First, genuine Afro-American music is introduced to the white middle-class public as a shocking novelty. Then it is adapted to their taste, principally by white musicians. Elvis was kind of rockabilly. There was a white element in it. He was bringing essentially black music, but there was a little bit of country, white rockabilly sentiment in there, sensibility there. Once this relatively bland commercial product won acceptance, right? Motown, all this other stuff, the public is ready for a new, darker influx, and the cycle begins again. This is very good, right? So you had Motown, R&B, all this, music that now seems quaint. It was the plague the whole time. I don't know, is there a similar disease, a similar debility that comes first as pleasure, right? Are there diseases or viruses that you get that begin as euphoria, as enjoyable? Probably. I don't know. They say that drowning is actually, once the water fills your lungs, you get this pleasant feeling. I don't know. Yeah. Now he goes on and he gets to the heart of the matter. Why is this appealing? Forget all this nonsense about politics. Forget what the black people have to say about it, ironically, about their own production. The counter, here's Semmelweis, where he gets to the point, and he gets it right. The counter argument to saying that this is emotionally immature is that it's also primal and visceral. What is emotionally immature, of course, is the lyrics. They're stupid, and they're dumb, and, anybody with any sense can see that. But it's also primal and visceral. It's the male id speaking without a filter. No matter how cultured or smart you are, as a man, there is always part of you that wants to thump your chest like a gorilla and declare your strength to the world. Some of the reason that whites have, and that's all hip-hop is. That's all effective hip-hop is. Like I said, I'm hearing it all the time now. So I'm listening, and I'm thinking, it's all the boast. There's nothing really, anybody who goes beyond that, it's like the boat. The boast is like the boat, and you go swimming in the water, but you don't go too far away from the boat. You always got to come back to the boat. Some of the reason that whites have historically liked black musical and cultural forms is for their perceived closer affinity to primal emotions like this, including primal sexuality. This was a large component of the mid-20th century phenomenon, which Norman Mailer called, quote, the white Negro, unquote. White hipsters consciously identifying with and trying to emulate blacks because they were seen as more connected to primal nature, less alienated from it than the dominant WASP culture. This white Negro hipsterism was a development of the cult of the primitive, which began a century before. The critic Charles Glicksberg wrote, quote, what the jaded taste of the white intelligentsia craved was excitement, and the excitement was provided in an abundance by the pounding rhythm of jungle drums, the fierce tempo of jazz music, the mad glee of tap dancers, the element of sinister magic in the ancestral religion of the Negro. Through the atavistic literature and art of the Negro, might it not be possible to recapture the lost quality of the spontaneous, the instinctive, the primitive? That was the substance of the aesthetic hope, unquote. Part of the reason that white kids in the suburbs became fascinated with gangster rap's portrayals of urban black violence in the 80s and 90s has to do with the same primal energies that had white kids fascinated with black sexualized dancing in the 20s, and which created Mailer's quote-unquote white Negro phenomenon in the 50s. In those previous cases, the dominant energy was sex. In the gangster rap phenomenon, sex becomes secondary to violence. This is important. And this is another weird thing about it. You know, money over bitches, remember. Despite sex being a very important part of this, despite the fact that those white kids feel sexually inferior and think they might gain, they might somehow leap over that gap they see between them and the sexualized blacks. The music itself has become definitely more about violence than sex. In the sex, it's not about sex, pleasure, love. It's about dominance. It's another kind of violence. You know, you dominate other men by beating them up. You dominate women by pleasing them sexually. And here's the part that white people probably don't want to talk about. I think there's a phase that we go through here. So you start out thinking, okay, you know, it's obvious that these black people, these black men are more physical and therefore probably sexually superior to me if I adopt their ways. Right? It's the nature-nurture misconception all over again. If I adopt their ways, then I will become like them or at least equal to them. I'll make up this gap. Well, we're in another phase. We're beyond that phase. And this is the worst part. This is when it's time to start like rounding up these stupid white kids and just slapping them hard. We've gone beyond that, obviously. We're in the maturation, the mature phase. Here is that, oh no, no white kid is going to make himself black, you know, if they think that's what the thing is they want. It's not possible. So now it's just white kids who are, it's a form of adoration. It's a religious thing. That's what we're talking about today on Sunday. Now it's just white kids recognizing it and honoring it in the same way, you know, they originally, the same way you honor achievement or you honor martial glory, you honor this primitive state, this primitive superiority that includes sex and violence. That's, you know, we're going to end on that, I think. And that's what rap is now. It's white idiots going to the altar of black, atavistic black primacy, you know, physicality, and the stupidity of the lyrics, the utter stupidity of it all, is actually featured on a book. Because higher thinking, philosophy, tolerance even, these are effete. These are weaknesses in this new order. So we've raised these people up, but of course, there's nothing that black people can do with it. God bless them. I don't hate them. But, you know, they're still, at the end of the day, like children. And they may, in fact, be superior in violence and sexuality and physicality and all these other things. But not as much as they are inferior in intelligence, morality, in what I used to call demonstrated humanity. You know, and all of those things that they sneer at, that to the extent they're aware of them, all of those things that they view as weakness. There's a reason why blacks are the biggest bullies in the schools. It's not just the political aspect. They hate us for the history they've been taught. That's certainly maybe the biggest part of it, but there's something else. I judge different peoples by how they treat each other. That's, you know what I mean? I judge black people by how they treat one another, not how they treat us, because that gets complicated. How do they treat each other? Well, they treat each other in many ways worse than they treat white people. And why are they such terrific bullies, right? Why are they so often such horrible bullies? And I think about them bullying each other. Well, what do they do when they bully each other? They just single out the weakest people. They're punishing weakness. You know, you can see the necessity of bullying. The necessity of cruelty is demonstrated by black bullying of other blacks. They see the weaker ones and they these weak people need to be taught a lesson. And if they won't take the lesson through repeated bullying, then they're going to be eventually murdered, or eventually killed, or eventually just bullied right. It'll be a form of ostracism. They won't be allowed to rise in the social context at all. They won't be allowed ultimately to breed, right? Bullying is evolutionary strategy. All right, we're going to leave it there because it's getting too dark, so to speak. So thank you all for coming. Anyway. Phil the Kill says the idea is fantastic from this writer, not quite fleshed out, and I think I'm going to have to tackle it, and I'll quote him at length maybe, where he gets it right. Yeah, I seem to remember this guy Semmelweis, who's been around, who's probably blogging something before this. I'll subscribe. I'll subscribe right now. You can go, oh, get the fuck out of here. No pledge. Come on. No pledge. I pledge to keep my money in my pocket. Thank you. All right. This is a good time to end. Oh, the North Koreans, they're not into hip-hop. Huh? These people are not into hip-hop.
너무 일만 시켰습니다. 책임자동, 네. 세속동물과 기술 혁신한 게 얼마나고요?
And we're all laughing at that.
국가 발명권을 받은 게 한 건이고.
Right? There's some white idiot in America who sees this and laughs at those poor, benighted North Koreans. Let's go listen to fucking, oh God, I wish I could remember his name. Let me hear that track again. They Not Like Us. Have you heard it? It's awful. It's like the worst fucking track. I mean, if you like hip hop, I don't know why. Four hours? Don't tell me we've done 4 hours. Holy shit. Oh, Bear. All right. Thank you, Phil, for your encouragement. We will indeed take up this. I was getting this one right. Of the few things I was getting right, I was getting this one right back in the day, and I should have, if I wasn't so damn lazy, I would have produced some good stuff on this subject. Because a lot of people don't want to talk honestly about it. They don't want to acknowledge, anyway. Let's leave it at that. Hey, Gleb, good to see you. You're here late. Bear. Yeah. All right. I'm just looking for the outro song. We want something good. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe an old one. Any suggestions? No. Let's just do this. Good old. Thank you all. Have a blessed Sunday. I am Brother Bubba. I will see you next Sunday.